Oh, it's actually live. This is actually live. It's not recorded. Okay, great. Do you mind if I have my coffee? Okay. I'm like trying to close all my tabs.
All right. Cool.
You're supposed to be talking.
I think we're good now. Like, this is the first time I've interviewed anybody in a very long time. Okay, I think we're good now. Yes, we are live right now with Catalina Lauf, congressional candidate out of Illinois, correct?
Yes.
You're bouncing around. Like, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
You're in Texas 1 minute. Now you're in Illinois. Like, so you're permanently in Illinois now. You're not coming back to Texas.
I am. No. I'll come back to Texas for a reason, but, you know, until then, we're saving the great state of Illinois.
All right, so thank you for coming on the podcast, first and foremost. And like we were just talking prior to us actually starting this thing, you know what kind of podcast this is. So I'm not going to do anything intentionally to try and jeopardize your congressional run, because all we need is like CNN or MSNBC picking something up. Like Catalina was interviewed by like a white supremacist or something like that. So, and we won't talk about midget strippers. We won't do any of that. So nothing like that. Nothing like that. So what are you doing right now? Like, what do you have going on in your life right now?
So I'm running for Congress for the second time. I'm running against Adam Kinzinger. He was one of the 10 who voted to impeach President Trump.
Was that what initiated your run? Because I remember there was a lot of outrage of the RINOs and people going out there voting for this. Is that what initiated you to do it again?
I would say that it played a big part in it, but it wasn't the sole reason. You know, living out here, people are on both sides of the aisle are so sick of career politicians and the way that this guy has been acting for the last 6 months, all throughout Trump's presidency. He was just one of the main Republicans, being outlandish, using his platform as a never Trumper to try to basically undermine everything that the Trump administration and the agenda was doing. And a lot of it, what we saw during that administration, which I had the honor of working there, so I saw it firsthand inside, was actually really benefiting districts like out here in the 16th district. This is heavy manufacturing, small business, everyday Americans, and the Trump administration's policies were actively allowing every American person to thrive. It didn't matter demographic, didn't matter job, background. Under the Trump administration, Americans were thriving, period. And when you have a representative who just wastes his time trying to further his own agenda out of ego, out there constantly talking poorly about the administration, talking poorly about the president without actually doing real work, I have a huge problem with that. And then on top of that, once Biden came into office and after everything that happened with Trump, there were some serious questions about the election, and questions should be answered. And your own member of Congress should not be sitting there calling you things like conspiracy theories and belittling you while he's up on MSNBC talking crap about everybody and wasting his time in DC. Go be a leader, be a servant leader. That's what members of Congress should be. So I decided to run and primary him. It is not something that people in the party were exceptionally happy with, no matter how bad he acted. And
with
we
the
don't
fact
care.
that you're primarying him or you're running against him, they didn't like that?
Yep, the establishment definitely like that. And
go figure. The GOP establishment doesn't like new blood coming in and like kicking out the boomers and the Gen Xers, and I'm seeing there's a transition going on right now in American politics that people don't realize. Millennials are starting to take over. They're starting to edge their way into the political spectrum, you being one of them as well. And I think like a lot of antiquated boomers don't like that because it's challenging not only their authority but the way they think, the way they do things. It's like I feel like the older generation has been one of those types that have been like, well, this is the way we've always done things, and millennials are like, no, this is stupid. We want to change. Like, society has evolved. So do you think that could be something that contributes to why the GOP establishment does not like people like you going in there and like bucking the system?
I absolutely. Look, nobody wants young people. They want to preserve their power structure, right? Yeah. And we have modern day challenges that need to be solved by new faces and new perspectives. That's just the way. And on top of that, our districts change, right? I mean,
Mhm.
millennials are becoming a stronger voter demographic.
Yep.
You have diverse people now, in districts that things just change, and we need to go with the flow in order to stay relevant. President Trump
Yep.
was able to bring in a broader base because he really spoke about liberty and our basic individual rights and things that matter, the economy. He really bucked the system, and being a America First candidate, kind of a liberty candidate is what I like to call us, and then being young is really powerful. And no matter what the establishment tries to do, they cannot help the fact that young people like me all across the country are rising up. And not just young people, I mean people from different backgrounds. We are in this patriot revolution type of era where everyday Americans are now stepping up,
Yeah.
because they're so sick of what's going on.
It also, social media definitely gives rise to the point where more people that were once never heard now have a voice, and those voices are definitely growing more prominent out there in the world, and people are starting to wake up and understand that it's not just the rich and powerful that are going to be heard; it's going to be every single person out there. So, you definitely pose a challenge to someone like him, because I imagine, based upon, you look at someone like Liz Cheney, that essentially voted in favor of the investigations or of the impeachment of Trump over January 6th riots. You see a lot of Republicans out there. And it's not just the fact that they're crossing the aisle. Like, there are some things like Rand Paul and other politicians that they will reach across the aisle and say, we do have some things that we can agree upon here. But when it comes to denial of actual facts and playing into a political narrative on the left, Liz Cheney and people like the douchebag you're running against, it's like, why are you buying into this? Like, this is not, I don't even think it has anything to do with Republicans versus Democrats. This is like, you either support the truth or you support a fabricated narrative because people just don't like Trump because Orange Man bad.
Exactly. And that is what we need to get away from. I mean, people see that, constituents see that. When you have somebody that actively, and I would go as far as to say that those people being on the January 6th Commission and everything that they've said prior, I mean, they are enabling the Democrats at this point to further their agenda. Then why are you in our party? Then you don't belong to be in our party if you're going to sit there and be a mouthpiece for the other side. We have real problems, not only with the fact of we are stemming away from truth. We are not allowed to think for ourselves in a lot of ways, is what the Democrats, don't want us to think for ourselves. And there are a lot of things, not only with spending, but look at what happened now with Afghanistan and foreign policy, the economy, real issues that the Democrats are slowly destroying our country. Look at mask mandates, the chipping away of individual liberties constantly. Those things matter to everyday Americans. Those are kitchen table issues. But instead, you have people like Adam Kinzinger who go out on a January 6th committee and then cry in public.
Such a man. Such a man.
Right.
I saw those interviews, and these grown ass men are sitting there, like the audacity they have to sit there and go into like crocodile tears over what happened on January 6th. Like, grow up. Like, that was not an insurrection. It was a riot. Or it was a mob. It was a bunch of stupid people that they let collectivism and anger control their emotions into doing something incredibly stupid. But to sit there and say that was an armed insurrection, and then grown man going up there and then just crying on these panels, on these congressional testimonies, is just something so. It just is what it is.
It's frustrating because mainly you look at things like what happened with the BLM riots, right? And we had.
Where's the investigation for that?
Right. Where is the investigation for that? We had horrible damage done to small businesses here in Illinois. Think about just the cultural implication when the country is in chaos over that. And yet nobody was held accountable. You had people that were getting millions of dollars put in their nonprofits and organizations and buying houses with it. And this is just, we are coming to a point where the gray area between right versus wrong is showing its ugly head. And the January 6th Commission is another political ploy for the Democrats to just look at every single Trump supporter, patriot, Republican as just, you guys are all domestic,
terrorists. They continue using these adjectives and these words that we're going over an article here later in the podcast in regards to the law that was just passed in Texas as far as the abortion law. It's got a lot of people's feathers ruffled, but I think it was Joy Reid, and we're going to cover this, is that basically saying that Texans and people that support this are the American Taliban. And normally I don't really take criticisms from Democrats, especially racist black ones that want to cover up their racism, using this progressive ideology of equality. It's black supremacy at its core. You have people like Lloyd Austin, black Secretary of Defense that took office, that comes in there and says we're going to have a 60-day stand down to hunt out extremism within the ranks. And then all the clips, all the stuff that was sent to me by my guys still serving, basically said, Burke, honestly, they're trying to go after and label white Republicans as being extremists. And I often find, more times than not, that the people that are screaming the loudest about racism are they themselves usually hiding racist intentions through a supremacy type narrative. And so when you have people like Joy out there talking about that we're the American Taliban, and then instantly they start spinning it as this is going to impact minorities more than anybody else, and which is true to an extent, because in the black community they have way more higher abortion rates than whites. But even still, the point being is that there's just this constant bombardment of adjectives that are completely inaccurate, that are completely taken out of context, and nobody's listening to them anymore. When they sit there and say oh, you're a racist, oh, you're a fascist, oh, you're a communist, oh, you're this, and it's the party that is screaming this the most seems to have the most of this within its group.
Yeah, and what's really bad about things like that is that it takes away from the real meaning of it, because there are instances that there is racism, and there are people who are now basically taking away from that meaning when they just use it all the time.
It's like the boy who cried racist wolf. You've been screaming it so much, when actual racism presents itself, right, everybody's well, okay, where are you at on this one? Why is nobody saying anything about this?
Exactly. And you even look at the political side of things when you talk about censorship. And I remember during the election where we could wear Trump MAGA t-shirts without whispering, or not, sorry, you couldn't talk about Trump without whispering, and then wearing t-shirts and stuff, you were looked at as a social pariah. People were hiding who they were going to vote for. That is we live in a free country, and when you have people choosing what is right and what is wrong, we're going down a really scary path. And the elites and the progressives get to decide, and the culture woke warriors get to decide what their language is and who is who and who's labeled. That's not a free and fair society.
What's going on in the Middle East right now, in the Biden administration, I am very interested in hearing your thoughts on how that's been handled, as far as two different scenarios. Number one, the Taliban takeover, and number two, the withdrawal process. What are your thoughts on this?
John, I cannot tell you the last week, and again, I have no room to talk. I've said this constantly on social media, compared to what actual warriors on the ground are going through. I've had the honor of being somewhat involved with those things, and to really...
You've been doing a lot on your Instagram. I've been seeing what you post. You're actually getting involved. You're trying to bring awareness. You're trying to actually raise funds for a lot of these SOF groups going over there and trying to rescue these people. I've been seeing what you're doing.
And to hear the reality of what has been going on, the lies that have been told by the media, and just the lack of accountability makes me truly sick to my stomach.
I assume you watched this speech.
Oh, I had to stop.
Yeah, I feel you.
To hear that our people are being left behind, not only operators who went out there because of their own selfless act when they were asked by different organizations to help out in a humanitarian way. First of all, that shows so much about our military community and our veterans, and just the heart of what other army and military in the world would volunteer in a horrible situation like that, with no government trust, would still actively go out there to try to make things better and rescue Americans. That to me is one of the silver linings and the bright light in all of this, is that we truly have selfless Americans. But I will also say that hearing directly from some of these guys on the ground what's going on, I don't know if you recently saw, but the State Department was actively blocking
Yep.
planes from landing in an area to make sure our AMSITs and allies were getting out. You know, I've been involved with this stuff, and it shows incompetence. It shows just the complete weakness of this administration to not be able to make decisions, and in some ways it seems intentional. And that is, people should be outraged over this.
I think they are. I think they are.
But they cannot forget. You know, we can't just let this sweep under the rug. Nobody has resigned. Nobody.
Yeah, that's another thing. There have been no firings and no resignations. Why? Why is that? And right now, I think the most recent Rasmussen poll said that it was like 52 or 53% of Democrats think Biden should resign. That's saying something.
It is. And I honestly think it's more of a testament to the era that we're in. You know, you look at people like Jimmy Carter and Nixon, people who screwed up in leadership and in war and made the wrong choices. And they had the backbone and the dignity, minor dignity, to at least stand up and say, look, I screwed up here, and the buck stops with me. I should be held accountable. That's in its own way. When you look back into the times that we're in now, I would consider that honorable, even if you screwed up. You have the most arrogant political appointees and egotistical people in this administration that nobody has the gall to say, I screwed up, I need to leave, somebody else needs to take this over.
Well, Biden just sat there in his speech and just did deflect, and tried to pin it on Trump, and then basically said Trump negotiated a deal with the Taliban, and that's where I think a lot of civilians don't seem to understand. It's like, look, when somebody comes in and takes over, you have no other alternative but to negotiate with them. It's like, to sit there and say that we're not going to recognize Afghanistan having a Taliban government is to deny reality. They own Afghanistan. Now they are the government, and you're going to have to address them as such. And it's not because you want to, it's just because that's how the chips have fallen. But the thing that aggravates me the most is when people on the left consistently go back and deflect to Trump's negotiations with the Taliban. He negotiated a ceasefire and said, this is the withdrawal process, back off, let us get out of here, and then the Afghan army will do its thing, and y'all can come to talks over that. So Biden's continuously deflecting over to Trump just showcases, like, bro, you don't get to blame this on Trump anymore. Like, this is you. Like, this is your administration. Now, the Taliban takeover, and this is where I've had a lot of arguments with a lot of civilians, like, the Taliban takeover was not Biden's fault. I don't see it being Biden's fault. Anyone that put boots on the ground over there knew firsthand Taliban were coming back. We never fully destroyed ISIS. We never fully destroyed Al-Qaeda, and certainly not the Taliban, because you don't muster 75,000 troops in the period of a week. They were waiting. You know, there's a saying that the Taliban has is like, you know, you have the watches, but we have the time. They have outwaited empires since the dawn of time. Alexander the Great, the Russians, you name it, they've done it. So the reason that people are like upset at Biden with the Taliban takeover, I feel is a lot of it is they don't understand the complexity of what that was about. But with the withdrawal, to me, that's where I take issue with. It's not, I can't blame Biden for Taliban coming in. That was a failure, unless, because now I do have to rescind some things I've said. There is news surfacing. I haven't verified it, but they're talking about now that Biden had a phone call with the president of Afghanistan, and there was some discussion in there in regards to standing down. So if that order did come from Biden and the Afghan president obeyed it, then it is on Biden for the takeover. It is on Biden. And then, you know, like I said, I reserve the right to change my mind on this stuff. But as far as the withdrawal process, what have you seen that upsets you the most about how it was handled?
I would say, first of all, why didn't we have all of our Americans or American citizens and allies ready to go and leave in an organized, non-chaotic fashion? I mean, is that hard? We know everybody who's over there. They knew that the withdrawal process was going to happen. Why wasn't this coordinated more? Why was it a logistical and tactical failure?
Did you know? Yeah. Did you know, like, weeks ago? Do you remember when they said that we pulled out of Bagram in the middle of the night and didn't tell the Afghan? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that there were Americans still there? Because I didn't. I was under the impression that everyone was gone.
No, I guess I didn't.
I didn't know that because, yeah, the way they painted that, it was that all Americans are out. So then when they come back and say, "Oh, we still have Americans over there," well, where the hell did this come from? Like, y'all made us think that we still had, like, everybody was gone.
Well, and what's even more concerning is you ask some of those American citizens, and they'll tell you that they had no idea and that they had no contact within our government. Mm-hmm. And why are they reaching out to people like myself and others via Instagram to try to survive? Like, this is the job that the government should have been doing. And on top of that, the amount of protection that was there is not, from my understanding, was not to the extent of what the world superpower should have had on the ground there. The Taliban, when people are saying that they were acting moderately and that they were, doing a peaceful transition, no, I have multiple situations where the Taliban were, beating children, beating women. They were not making this an easy process to anybody. Why were we allowing that? Beating American citizens, beating American women and children, and harassing people. That's not a peaceful transition. That's not somebody that you sit there and allow and continue to negotiate with. You show strength, you show power, and we did none of that in this withdrawal.
What do you think our allies are thinking about us right now? I have a feeling I know what you want to say, but you're not going to. Like, we're a bunch of bitches right now.
I can only hope that there are reasonable people in our military, and I don't blame the military for this at all. SOCOM, JSOC, the military in general, how are you supposed? I mean, they have orders from the administration. So,
well, people are calling for freaking Lloyd Austin and General Tilley to step down, to step down, to resign, because essentially they feel like they didn't do enough to warn Biden. And then, I mean, so I have to kind of disagree with you on this one. It's not your fault, because I don't think you know this, but within the military, there was intelligence communities within the military that were warning them. And then Miley did the press conference and blamed the intelligence community and said, oh, no, they didn't tell us that. And the intelligence community was like, yes, the hell we did. You didn't listen. So it seems like there's a lot of finger pointing back and forth. And that's also within, and I think I covered this like back in 2015 when I did all my fat shaming and got big on social media. I was like, we have a woke progressive military, and this is the result of that transition of, number one, your alpha males, your men that are supposed to be men that use 4-letter words, dip and fuck like porn stars and fight like freaking savages. And this is what you've got now. You've got a woke military that you have a bunch of yes men that are surrounding the president. And as a result, we have ineffective, toxic leadership that at the top down, the troops have no faith in. None. It's like, I don't trust you to lead me effectively because I think that you are so concerned about your career that you're going to deny the truth and facts to lie to people up in the higher echelons in the hierarchy and the president to cover your ass. Meanwhile, it's the boots on the ground that suffer.
All to make it political. And I will say, however, there are some, and I did know about the when they were pointing the fingers at the intelligence community, and which I think made a lot of people upset, especially in the community. Because they're like, look, you're making us look like the ones that are bad at our jobs when you were well aware. I will say it all comes down to politics, like everything. And I know that sounds so, it just comes down to politics.
No, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. Yeah, it's the optics.
And it's the optics, but I will say that there are some behind the scenes that really, look at
That's Zoe.
Hi, Zoe.
This is the very unusual podcast. We have we got like a zoo here at the Shell Shock headquarters.
You look at her.
She just she'll get on my shoulder and pull a Biden. She'll start sniffing me. It's crazy.
There are people that were internally, I would say, even on both sides of the aisle, that are trying to do the right thing, and they're just constantly being roadblocked at every point. And I think the biggest guy who, Blinken, needs to resign out of anybody. Again, this is government, typical bureaucratic mess, but to it be this chaotic shows a bigger problem with everything. And you only have to, your mind only goes to, why was it this bad? If we're the world superpower, it had to have been, there has to be more to the story.
And then you got people like Pelosi who are not doing anything. Like, there are a lot of GOP representatives calling to convene Congress and like, let's do something, and she's not doing anything. So it's like the blame can be shared around. Like, and that's the thing that I'm going to talk to this. I'm going to bring this up with Congressman Crenshaw tomorrow, because there's a lot of people telling him and others, like, why don't you do something? Like, do something. It's like, well, they're trying. Like, what do you want them to do? Like, Crenshaw is saying, hey, convene Congress. Let's start trying to make something happen. And and I think that a lot of people are getting a bad rap in the GOP because the GOP has made a lot of threats. And when they were in power, when they had the majority, nothing got done. Big tech, and this is where people are starting to wake up to what actual slacktivism on social media is. Like, when you have Ted Cruz like grilling Zuckerberg for these great little tidbits of viral videos where he's slamming them, but nothing changes. They still have government protection. These free market private companies are still backed up by the government. Like, the people are losing faith in the GOP. They're losing faith in their teeth. It's like, when you were in control, when you had a majority, what did you do to stop this besides grilling people in Congress?
Right. And the frustration stems even way back when Paul Ryan was Speaker of the House back during the Tea movement, where Obamacare was passed under a Republican-controlled House, which comes down to lack of leadership and weakness. I mean, I'll just say it out front. I know a lot of members personally, and I know the good ones, and I know the ones who are just completely unreliable. And I will say that Congressman Crenshaw has truly really tried to do his part and use the platform. I've been in contact with him. A lot of the guys on the ground that I know have been in contact with him. There are a few people who are trying to do the right thing, but screaming and nothing really gets done. And unfortunately, it takes the people. I mean, elections have consequences. We cannot do everything all the time. And we can do what we can in our power. Like, I try to use my social media. This is just in my particular case, but I know other candidates that really tried to use their platforms and go on media and really try to expose and help and raise money for folks on the ground, and then do our part from a logistical standpoint, whatever we were involved with. But by and large, what can members do?
Exactly. I think the people are like to the point where they think, well, they should be grabbing guns and going in there and storming the White House. Like, what? It's like, it doesn't work that way. Like, Congress, and that's what I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to how the meat is made when it comes to how Congress operates. And I think people are starting to finally start to see how it works. And like, oh, this sucks. Like, Congress has to do its job. It's like, we can't just scream and stamp our feet and demand that this changes. Like, it has to take acts of Congress. And unfortunately, that's why they say acts of Congress.
Well, but you also look at, there's a lot of power in the public pressure. Again, I'll use the BLM example because that is like, it'll go down in history as a moment where, how do you have celebrities, every business? I mean, every day in the Wall Street Journal, you saw a new ad for, with the black square and
Instagram doing black-owned businesses like this. And when you as a white person call this out, it's like, wait a minute, what about other minority businesses? Like, it's not just black people. If you want to talk about economic differences and inheritance and generational wealth, how there's an imbalance there, we can have that discussion. But why are you sitting there promoting black-owned, not Asian, not Irish, not Jewish? But it's because they scream the loudest. That's why they get all the recognition.
Well, and think about, and it was the progressives, but think about the amount, how fast we talked about it from a legislative perspective. You had senators, you had members of Congress, states ready to write legislation against police brutality. How fast because of all the public pressure, how quick did the whole entire world stop? I mean, the entire world stopped. Companies withdrew funding from places if they didn't comply. I mean, the whole world stopped. And here you have 13 dead service members. Where are the celebrities?
Where's it? I'm waiting. Catalina, I can't tell you how stressed out I've been that I don't have LeBron James telling me what I should be doing right now or thinking. Like, I'm waiting. Like, Chelsea Handler, where are these people at? Like, I've been waiting for them to tell me how I should be feeling about this because they were so vocal during the BLM. But when one of their own progressives, Democrats, like, drops the ball, suddenly they get really quiet. Like, really quiet. Like, Alyssa Milano is like congratulating Biden, saying, this administration is doing a wonderful job. It's like, that's like going in there and rescuing a cat from a burning building that you set fire to. It's like, are you really congratulating yourself on partially unscrewing what you screwed up? Like, do we really congratulate people over that?
Exactly. And that is so heartbreaking to me that you have valuable lives were lost. You have more that are going to be lost. Just to be frank, if we don't get this figured out and American citizens are still trapped there and they can't get out, what do you think is going to happen to, the audience? We all understand the realities over there. And yet, and even our operators there that are still out there that are not receiving the help and the resources that they need. And everybody is so quiet, from the celebrity world, the business world.
Why? Yeah. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, it's really not. You know why.
It's all politics. And that's what I try to kind of tell people all the time, is that we are heading to scary times. I mean, and I think that there's so much room for optimism, because I do believe in, the generation and liberty, and people. We have freedom in our blood. Like we are the greatest country in the world on our worst day.
According to the government, we have COVID in our blood right now. So,
but if we don't do our part in that public pressure and making sure that people are held accountable in our own way, the way that we've seen it done before. So it's not impossible.
Yep. I've got my interview questions on my phone. That's why I'm looking at my phone. So I'm not ignoring you. Okay.
No.
Okay. So another important question that I have for you, because I asked the listeners of the podcast and viewers on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook to send in their questions that they would have for you and Congressman Crenshaw. And the number one question I've got for you, you already know what it is. It's like, is Catalina Lauf single? I kid you. I got a huge veteran following, and I'm not even going to lie. The majority of us think with our dicks. So, and I did not want to bring you on here and then make that the focal point. Like, oh, hot Congress. Like, I want to know what you think and what you stand for. But I do have to, I represent my following, and a lot of them's like, is Catalina Lauf single and looking right now?
First of all, I'm flattered that even came up, so thank you, whoever. There was a lot, and some women. I'm not gonna lie, this is 2021. There was a lot of people like, is she single? I plead the fifth.
Fair enough. Sorry, guys and girls, I tried for you. All right, midterms in 2022, with the current debacle going on, what are your predictions and forecasts for what's coming in 2022?
Oh my God, John. I think Democrat plus. So I'm just for your listeners, there's a scale that we all use for every congressional district. It's called the Cook PVI. And it basically determines how Democrat or how Republican a seat is. And I'm telling you, we have medium blue, D plus, 8, 10, 12 seats that are going to be in play. That could determine like how the House goes as well, because the House is like 50-50 almost right now, with Kamala being like the split. Don't even get me started on the fact we could flip the House in 2020, but again, I blame that on Republicans for their lack of effort and resources into districts that mattered. But I will also say, Democrats are so upset with everything that's going on, especially I come from a blue state. Our governor has been so authoritarian when it came to lockdowns, when it came to the mask mandates, and it got worse after the election, obviously, in 2020. And so when you think, it's become personal to a lot of people. I have people on the ground, nurses, teachers, parents, they'll come up to me and say, I never cared about politics until it became personal to me, and my job was at stake, my liberties at stake, my kids have to wear, my football kids have to go wear masks on the field. This is just, we have gotten to a point where finally it's getting personal to people, and I say finally because it needed to get to the breaking point for people to wake up and care. I think we're going to take the House back, no problem. I think we're only about 5 or 6 seats down. The biggest issue is the redistricting. Obviously, in a lot of these states, Democrats control, but I think they're severely underestimating the travesty of this administration. When you talk about the southern border, the economy getting into inflation, now with this whole Afghanistan withdrawal, people are pissed off.
Yeah. I mean, again, like you said, when you see, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that you have good people now running that all across the country that are really able to connect with, you have everyday Americans and people want that fresh face and new
Mm.
perspective. That I think we have a huge shot at actually bringing in new people because people are so sick of the politicians.
Do you think? And so this is one thing that I've observed in the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years. A lot of people are utilizing social media to gain
Yeah.
traction in the political spectrum, to gain votes, and which it's smart of them to do. But it feels to me there's a lot of grifters coming up through the ranks that are amassing large followings that are basically just regurgitating the very same boomer, antiquated GOP ideologies to try and fit in. How is somebody like me, a voter, supposed to vote for somebody like that that is echoing the sentiments of the older generation that we no longer really agree with? Like, we don't really identify with Mitch McConnell's way of thought anymore. Like, it's a different generation coming in and taking over. And what I'm seeing is there's a lot of blue check marks out there grifting. Like, I saw one post yesterday. It was a Marine Corps. It was the Marines going over there to Kabul and stuff like that. And I'm not. It was David Harris Jr. And I saw the video on his channel, and right below it, he has the shop now. And so to me, it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute. You've got a video that's going to do very well, get a lot of clicks. It's utilizing Marines, it's utilizing the dead, and you're trying to push your product. You're trying to push your brand. And I don't know if it's just me, but that kind of strikes me a little funny. It's like, why are you using dead Marines to sell your products? And it's stuff like that that I just don't have any faith in a lot of these people that I think they're grifters. I think that they latch on to Trump's coattails. They try and get close to the White House as they can. And then when it comes time, when Trump does or says something wrong, or the GOP does, like, they're quiet. They don't say a thing. Like, I've seen it from Turning Point. I've seen it from Charlie Kirk. I've seen it from a lot of these people out there. It's like, wait, so you're supposed to tell me that you represent the GOP, that you represent true conservatism and Republican values. But when your own party screws up, when your own president does something wrong and you remain quiet, how am I supposed to trust you to stand up for what's right when the time comes?
Yeah, and it comes down to being, and look, that's incredibly valid, and it people can think deeper. I mean, everything is very surface level nowadays when you talk
Mm.
about social media and headlines and what's making headlines and what's not, how you spread your message. But I think it's up to people to discern the values of somebody. And I think especially for candidates, I've actually been pretty impressed with the way candidates
Mm.
have acted. The candidates that are true, that are there for the right reasons, and actions speak louder than words. People that are like, oh, I know that this person was there when
Mm.
I needed them. They've been on the ground. They're listening to their constituents. I think the candidate structure is a lot different than maybe more of the commentator or the media world. And I think those are what people need to look at, is to heavily vet the candidates, heavily really discern those people over more of kind of the media world, because ultimately the candidates are the ones that are going to go on and do what needs to be done in Congress, and they answer to their constituents. I
So
think
that
matters
poses
more.
the next question I have for you.
Yeah.
When someone runs for Congress, or say like you get elected for Congress, and I asked Crenshaw this last time I interviewed him. I was like, do you believe that your stance should reflect that of your voter base, or should it reflect your individual values? And I pose the same question to you.
I think you are voted upon based on your values.
Mm-hmm.
They're they're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that might not always agree with you
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time, but at least for myself, if I'm going to Congress, I want somebody to vote for me because they believe that not only I align with their values, but I'm going to go to Washington and scream and fight as much as possible on their behalf and to what they want and what is in their best interest, not my own. And they should always be one and the same. I think that's servant leadership. I think that that's what our founding fathers wanted. They wanted somebody that was going to represent 700,000 people, maybe not that much back then,
Right.
but nowadays, and be a lion for those values. And people vote on you for your values. That's why you get moderates, Democrats, libertarians, Republicans, unless you're in a very far Republican seat, you are getting a lot of different diverse people voting for you, and they're voting for you based on who you are and your values. So,
okay, I'm going to ask you some hard-hitting questions here because I'm not going to lob you softball questions. I want to get your actual stances on these issues, and I think it's fair to the consistent your voter base to know these things as well as my audience. The legalization of marijuana, recreational and medicinal, where do you stand on that?
That's a state issue, so I really wouldn't be able to have a whole lot of impact there.
Well, I mean,
We're
what's your
seeing,
opinion, though, at least?
yeah, I would probably be more leaning in favor of that, of the more leaning in favor of
Legalizing it?
legalizing it.
Because I
Yeah.
asked Crenshaw the same question. He said, I'm not willing to die on that hill. He said, because basically my
Yeah.
voter base of moms don't appreciate marijuana. But then I posed the question of, well, how is it okay that you can go home and drink a 6-pack of beer, tear up your liver, have the same outcome as far as like a psychological effect, but I can't smoke a joint? Like, and
Yeah.
I'm not even a weed smoker, but I do understand the differences here because I think this is a big differential between the boomer generation and millennials. Is like we're starting to wake up to this idea that we've been lied to for a very long time, especially in the veteran world of opioid addiction and things such as that. But then you have things like weed and CBD and things such as that that are coming out saying, hey, we can actually get off these opioids and address a lot of these issues with a more natural approach. And I'm not saying weed fixes that stuff. I'm just saying that it's much better than popping Oxycontin left and right and getting addicted and screwing up your life versus going out there and smoking a joint. And it's like, oh, I'm good. Like I feel so much better.
Well, and I think those are different. Like, I think for the veteran community and let's say for cancer patients as well, there needs to be more of the allowing of more research and allowing marijuana to be used in medical cases. I 100% support that. And I
But
think
what about recreational?
recreational, I agree with Dan that it's a tough hill to die on, but it's also not our hill to die on because again, it's all state-based here. Especially you have, small communities that they make the choice. The townships are the ones making the choices. The villages are making the choices. So say you legalize it everywhere. Well, I think, the towns or the boards, the councils are allowed to take it away if it's causing too much of an issue for their particular area. So that one's a lot more public based than any legislator.
But
I think.
if we claim to stand for liberty and the freedom to choose, and it's your body, you do what you want. Because I mean, this has been something that's been echoed on both sides, whether it be pro-abortion or anti-vaccine. Your body, your choice. So my mind is like, why am I going to vote for somebody that doesn't exemplify the liberty values across the spectrum? Like, here's the thing. I'll be completely transparent. I don't give a shit if the mom next to me doesn't like weed and she doesn't want it legalized. Like, I don't care. Then don't smoke it. It's kind of like with homosexual marriage. It's like, because before I was kind of like, no, it shouldn't be legalized. And then I understood that I was like, no, wait, it's freedom to do as you see fit. You don't have to agree with an issue, but you can agree with the right for those people to do what they want to do with their lives. So if 2 men, 2 women want to get married and be miserable like the rest of us, far be it for me to say you shouldn't be allowed to. So then who are we to sit there and say that you can't smoke weed?
Right. No, I understand where you're coming from. And again, I
told you I'm going to hit you with some hard balls.
fine, and I appreciate it, but that's just an area that, again, I haven't had a whole lot of crossover with. Again, I'm 100% for it from a veteran, PTSD, medicinal, cancer patients. My God, I've heard so many stories of the FDA and the politics getting involved on a national level for the medicinal side, which I don't think is right at all. But in terms of recreational, I think that, at this point, fine, if that's what you want to do, right? I want to go solve the economy and make sure that people can actually go work and have businesses, and want to make sure that our borders shut.
Okay, so that's a fair segue into the next issue of like right here in Texas right now. So I own Shell Shock CBD. We're doing insanely well, and we're looking to push into the marijuana market. Do you know how much it costs to get a medical dispensary license in Texas right now for marijuana?
Don't even want to know.
$750,000. So how is the small man in an economic equality kind of world supposed to be able to do something like that? Because what you just said is you want to argue or you want to go fight for economics and then, freedom. I get that. It's like, but these things have trickle-down effects. So when the government comes in there and says, hey, like, yeah, we are going to offer it for veterans and like that, but a small man, I'm supposed to cough up. And by the way, that's 2-year payoff. Every 2 years, I got to pay the federal government, or I got to pay the state, almost $750,000. Where am I getting that kind of money? How am I going to start my business on that?
Yeah, well, that's any business. I come from the nutraceutical space, and the amount of regulations that we have to create our products is through the too. And I'm all for making sure that we are focused.
Deregulate. Yeah, you're right.
And I also and correct me if I'm wrong, but even banks aren't allowed.
I don't know. You just say, I automatically correct me that you're wrong. Okay.
Some dispensaries, or I don't know in your space, but even some banks won't even allow them to be opened and working with them directly. So, and I think that's a problem. I think it's more government. And the biggest problem too, the marijuana argument, is I am not for the fact that you have the politicians and the states are going to want to have their hands in everything, right? And that should be in any case. You're going to have your own dispensary, or you're going to open up your own marijuana shop, or whatever it might be. And then the amount of money that is somehow going into the politicians, like here in Cook County, you have stories of where medical dispensaries have to like pay so much money to the politicians on the back end, and it all feeds corruption. So I think it's a complex topic, and one I would love to learn more about. It's just not exactly on the hierarchy of the political space right now.
I think soon it will be, though. I honestly feel like soon it will be, because there's a lot of people, especially in the veteran world, saying we want elected leaders to go up there and fight for this. I've been talked to by 3 or 4 different people that are saying we want you to join us to lobby DC to legalize marijuana. It's like, I got other things I got to take care of right now. It's like, but I will continue to back your fight as much as I can. But I feel like that's becoming on the top, one of the top 10 lists of what people want. And I think you're right in what you said as far as like those who scream, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But it's like, how loud does the veteran community have to get to say, hey, this should be legalized, not just for the sake of our medicinal purposes, because what if it's the 4th of July and, those fireworks are going off, dudes are dealing with a lot of PTSD issues. They just want to, smoke something, pop an edible so they can kind of relax or anything like that, to where I think I should have the right to self-medicate if I want to with a product that, by the way, I never ever thought I would ever take the stance. But over the years, I think we've kind of evolved and changed our way of thought to support a more liberty-based, freedom style of perspective, if you will. Which leads me... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Also just say, too, when you look at the opioid pandemic and things that are really killing our veterans and making them reliant on
opioids. Big pharma is like... So here's another thing. There are a lot of the reasons why these, like Delta 8, for example. If you don't know what Delta 8 is an isomer of Delta 9. Delta 9 is what's found in actual weed. Delta 8 was a man-made version of it that is concentrated from hemp, but it's just straight THC. It's currently legal. 12 states have banned it. But the reason I say that is the states that have banned it primarily are states where medicinal and recreational weed is already legal. And marijuana businesses are now turning into the big pharma businesses because they're trying to attack anything that threatens their business. They're trying to attack anything that comes in to undermine their profits. And so, again, this is just more government regulation. So we're going to start seeing big weed businesses turn into big pharma businesses. And it's continuous. The more government sticks its hands in things, the more they screw it up.
Well, then it comes down to which one is worse. Like, I don't know. I'm not a scientist in drugs, but... It also comes down to, again, it's all about the money. And I would much rather, if a veteran prefers to have marijuana, I would much rather, just coming from, again, also a military family, like if that's what helps that particular person, like who am I to sit there and try to block it and say that you can't, right? But it's not an easy, I think it's much more complex. And again, it comes down to what the states want. I advocate for whatever veterans need to be better, and that would help them. It's up to them. And any way that I can go and do that and advocate for that in Washington, I will. But it again, it comes down to what's in my jurisdiction, right?
Right. Okay. I can see what you're saying there as far as what affects you directly versus the broad spectrum of things. I get that. Okay, so then I've seen a lot of people going out there in the GOP basically telling a lot of homosexuals that they're not real Republicans. How do you feel about that?
That's sad. I mean, at this point, let people love whoever they want to love.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's sad. And I honestly think that President Trump made a lot of gains in the gay community and more of kind of that liberty-focused community where it doesn't, like, why should that be a focal point in politics? Everybody wants to work. Everybody wants to provide for their families. Everybody wants to just live a happy life, the pursuit of happiness.
I think a lot of people are tying I think this is ultimately what it leads to. A lot of people are trying to tie in politics with religion. They're trying to push church and state together and legislate morality through a theocracy-based perspective, which I don't agree with.
I will say I agree with it in the sense of the values. I will say that, we were founded a country upon Judeo-Christian values, and it's love thy neighbor, like do what's right and wrong. Those values, not, hey, the church should be involved or religion should be involved in every aspect of government. I think those lines have been clouded a lot over time because of the way politicians have been. One side doesn't want the church involved in anything, and then another side is just simply saying, hey, the values of right versus wrong, Judeo-Christian values that we all, I grew up with, and in the Christian values, I'm a woman of faith, and you see now we're kind of in like a spiritual warfare in a lot of ways. I don't mean to get, down that rabbit path.
Well, that's fine. Go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead.
I will say, like, a lot of these topics are basic right versus wrong. We are in a test from a morality standpoint, and those lines have been blurred a lot the last couple decades.
How do you feel like some of those lines have been blurred?
Again, look at what's going on with, we'll use the example of these guys that should have resigned, right? Like, a moral, honorable person that has values would have resigned. That's just who you are in your moral structure, right? Doing right versus what's wrong. And now we are clouding that so much in every aspect of politics. The corruption, lack of integrity, no moral value base.
I gotta say, I don't think there's many politicians out there that are going to have a solid morality base. I think politicians, for the most part, by and large, whore themselves out to what the majority really want, and they compromise their individual values for the sake of how they're going to get more votes. And that's a dangerous thing, I think, for a lot of politicians. When you want to go out there and put your morality first, or you talk about values, like, everybody's values are different. So to me, it's kind of like, I'm of the mindset of, like, live and let live. Like, what you do behind closed doors, I don't care about. Just don't involve children. I was like, but I don't think the government has any right. Because, before it was this evolution of mindset for me to where it's like, I disagree with homosexuality from a theological standpoint. But I would also openly admit that I was like, okay, yeah, two guys gross, two girls going at it, okay, that's hot as hell. It's like, I'll admit that I'm a hypocrite in that aspect. But then it evolved even more so to the point of, it's like, yeah, I think two men and two women should be able to get married. Simply agreeing on the right of freedom to choose, freedom to do as you see fit, not from theology. And that's why I think church and state should be separate in that aspect. And then I took a step further to say, I don't even think government should be involved in marriage. I mean, if we truly look at this from a theological standpoint, it originated with the church. But even still, why is government getting involved in issuing marriage licensing? Nobody's asking these questions. Like, why are they even involved? And I understand for tax purposes and things such as that. We should never have to seek government approval to do anything that involves our own lives, especially marriage.
Okay, then I will counter that by saying,
yes, awesome debate. Let's do this.
Government be involved why should government be involved in the opposite of not incentivizing people to be married?
Okay, say that again.
Why should government be involved in the opposite of not incentivizing people to be married? So I'll say a law or a legislation, like
tax breaks and.
Right. Like, hey, if you don't get married, but you have 5 kids, we'll give you tax breaks. Is that right? No.
You're incentivizing. I think it should be straight across the board, honestly. Now, like, if you're single, that could have, but we're also talking about the nucleus at the point of saying, should the government even be involved in the process of issuing marriage? And I see what you're saying as far as taxation goes, but that should just be one of those, like, this is the board, these are the rules. If you're single, this is what you pay. If you're married, I mean, there are ways to go about this to basically say, like, hey, we ain't changing, but all you have to do is submit your paperwork to say I'm married or I'm single, that you go through a priest or whatever God or spaghetti flying monster in the sky you worship or don't worship. But I don't think the government should have the right to sit there and tell you that you should or you can or cannot be married. That's the basis of what I'm saying. But I see what you're saying as far as like the tax breaks. I think one could feed into the other without the government intervention. Because I believe in a strong. I love Milton Friedman's views on the abolishment of the FDA, the FCC. I love his economic viewpoints on what he stood for as far as less government regulation. And when you spit a lot of these things to people, when you come out and you say, I believe in the abolishment of the FDA, and you're like, wait, what? And then you kind of look at the situation we're in right now. It's the actual proving point of what happens without the FDA. You're going to have people that want to be the guinea pigs for a lot of these big pharma companies. You're going to have people that got, like me, it's like, I'm not anti-vax, but I'm not jabbing myself with that stuff until I know firsthand we've got a lot of clinical trials done on this over a period of time.
Right. And I'll say I'm a huge supporter of medical freedom. If you are a cancer patient, for example, and there is an experimental drug or something that, constantly regulations are impeding and blocking you from obtaining that. I don't agree with that at all. I'm fighting the forced vaccine mandates heavily. That's all freedom. And again, the social issues are really tough, but there is a line to be drawn on freedom. And I love Milton Friedman. And I also will say that don't even get me started on the amount of agencies and departments of so-and-so. That is hundreds, billions of our taxpayer money is going into an abyss of these people having their little hands in every aspect of our lives. And I am a fierce liberty person in that regard, that we should not have all of these millions of agencies and departments running our everyday lives. When you look at, they have no accountability, they have no goals, they have no metrics, nothing quantifiable. And yet it's our hard-earned taxpayer money going into feeding this, this tumor of just taking and taking and taking.
Do you have a meeting?
I did, but.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Did I?
No, it's okay. I know. I'm happy to be on. It's
okay, because I remember you said you had till 11, and it is 11:10 right now because you said you had a meeting.
It's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, okay. So with what you just said, you do what?
We can wrap things up. But.
Okay, we'll wrap. All right. So with that being said, then, where can people find you to donate to your campaign, and where can they follow you on social media?
Catalina Lauf on all social media platforms.
Spell that for me, please.
CatalinaLauf.
Perfect.
Social media platforms, and then CatalinaForCongress.com.
And then I need your social security number.
Okay.
No. Awesome. And so they can donate to you and your congressional run at CatalinaForCongress.com.
Yes. And we are so proud to have our average contribution is $30. And to go back, I don't want to take your time now.
No, I have no life. Go ahead.
Candidates, yes, you do. You're doing a lot. Candidates like myself we are backed by the people. Like, we have $5 and $10 contributions, and we're raising good money off of people that truly believe in us. Like, this is not corporate PAC money. This is not, the lobbyists getting a hold of having an influence on our campaigns. And I think that's the greatest silver lining on candidates like myself, of kind of these up and comers, is that when we're going up against the establishment and the big money powers, like, we are backed by the people, and that's who we answer to. So just to keep in mind, always recognize who you're supporting, because a lot of these candidates are, they're not backed by everyday people. They're backed by the powers that be, which is fine. That's those people's rights to support them. But I think we're going into a populist movement where you have accountability because we are backed by the people. If the people didn't support me with their $5 and $10, the farmers, the veterans, I wouldn't have a campaign.
You have a large veteran following. You got a lot of veterans that really support what you do, because you do a lot for veterans.
I appreciate that. And because they've done so much for us. And I feel so sick to my stomach that they have been left behind in so many different ways when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to even encouraging small businesses, life after the military, transitioning. And then on top of that, just the mental health crisis that we're in for the veteran community. To have politicians that don't want to understand or listen, and not only understand and listen, but then subsequently do what it takes from an action perspective on the Hill, is what really fuels my fire. And I will always, coming again from a military family, I've seen it firsthand in so many different ways of where the government has failed them. And it shouldn't be that way. I mean, you guys have been our warriors. You're doing the job that nobody wants, that people can sleep soundly for. And you're risking your life constantly to do that. And so any way that I can advocate and use my platform for good for the veteran community, I'm here for that. So anybody who's listening, I'm always sharing organizations, nonprofits, any causes, helping raise money, whatever you guys need, I'm here for you.
One final question before you go. If you had the authority to change one thing in America right now, anything it may be, what would it be? Say like you had full authoritative control to change whatever law, whatever the thing in America would be, what would it be right now?
That one's tough. Critical race theory.
Fair enough. A lot of people are going out there fighting it and banning it in schools and such like that.
Yeah, because I will say that the communist movement, and we can again go down a whole rabbit hole of this, but has infiltrated all aspects of culture. And what our economists, when you look at philosophy and economy, freedom of the economy has a direct relationship with a culturally free people as well. And if neither are free, and you're not free to choose in any way, whether it's what you think to economically building a company and whatnot, they're one and the same.
Did you see Hassan Piker?
No.
From the Young Turks. Do you know who Hassan Piker is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so he's a Twitch streamer. And this guy's raking in roughly $250,000 a month in Twitch revenue. And he just bought a $2.8 million house. And he's an advocate of socialism. And then he turns around using a capitalistic method, and then suddenly it's kind of like the BLM. The Marxists in that organization are all for like reformation of economy and pushing socialist tendencies. And then they get all this money, and what do they go do? It's like they hoard it, they become the rich elites, and they turn to the very same thing they fought against.
Exactly. And the way that they're attacking it now, they're attacking our economic structure is via the culture war, via critical race theory, via all these different mechanisms from a political and social aspect. And that's why we need to fight that in order to remain, to make sure that our economy is free.
Okay. I never thought about that. So you're saying they're using the culture war to push a hidden economic change agenda? Or maybe not hidden. Maybe they're just using that as the banner in which to influence economic change to a more socialistic movement.
Absolutely.
Okay,
because
fair
what
enough.
happened, think about, again, BLM is a great example. You have all of these businesses now that are forced to comply to standards based on the Cultural Revolution, and now that is directly going to affect the economy. They're one and the same. You strip away, the way that you get to our economic freedom is by stripping away our individual freedom. And they are doing that through the culture wars. So in order for us to maintain our individual economic liberty, we need to maintain our individual liberty.
I like that. Catalina, thank you for being a guest here. I wish you nothing but success and good luck in your congressional run. I hope you make it, and I hope you're able to influence massive change for the betterment of this country. And again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be right back with the All-American Savage Show podcast, where I'll be covering today's news. Don't you go anywhere. I'm going to relaunch the stream. We're going to get our camera set up good. We're going to bring Josh, my beautiful bearded husband, back in here, and we're going to get into it. A big thank you for Catalina for coming on the stream today. And again, you can check her out on Instagram and CatalinaForCongress.com. All right, you stay safe.